Welcome back to your show. Everywhere you turn these days, energy stories seem to be top of mind, whether it be gas prices, more drilling, rules regulating the industry. Joining us this morning to talk about it, Meg Collins, who we have working on her own microphone. Thank you very much. Head of the Colorado Oil and Gas Association, Stan Dempsey, who runs the Colorado Petroleum Association, and John Harpole, who is the president of Mercator Energy. Thank you all so much for being here and joining us on your show.
Appreciate it.
Let's get right into it because we have an overwhelming number of questions for you all. So we thank you again for. Bev Brinson writes in a question that I think seems to be on top of mind, and it speaks to your industry. She writes in, it seems that with oil companies making record profits, her words, they're overcharging, and this isn't an issue of supply and demand. I'll open it up to any of you, but how do industry insiders explain this?
I'll take the first stab at that, and I think the issue is you have to look at the industry from where the oil and gas comes out of the ground to where it's sold, and we're seeing incredible demand worldwide for our product, and that demand is having the effect of having consumers around the world compete for a scarce commodity, and that's why we see $140 barrel of oil that was just that occurred on Friday, and when you have $140 a barrel, a price per barrel, that's going to create higher prices, and it frustrates your viewers and people around the state, and we understand that, and we're doing all that we can to correct that problem.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that? Sir?
I'd like to. The big oil myth is a myth. 95% of the reserves in the world are controlled by national oil companies. The 14th largest company in the world is ExxonMobil, and it's a very damaging myth in the sense that it doesn't send the correct message to the consumers out there. Right now we have offshore U.S. about 656 trillion cubic feet of gas, enough to heat 60 million homes for 160 years, but it's under what we call federal moratoria, where we can't drill. And so the big oil myth is one that I think we need to dispel just by educating the public. It's truly a supply and demand issue.
This week, the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission has held hearings here in Denver. This is a process that's gone on for a number of months. Meg, your organization held a rally at the state capitol during the legislative session to try and address some of this. I wanted to read you some of what we've gotten about that, and
Sure.
I'll have you react. Carol Brown writes in, what can be done to convince the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission not to put such punitive and industry-threatening rules in place? She says many of us are now dependent on direct income from the gas wells, or she has rentals and laundromat, both of which she said would be empty if the gas industry is gone. How concerning is it to you of what's happening right now?
It's of grave concern, as you can tell from the rallies we've held. We had a commission meeting in Grand Junction where over 2,000 people showed up to express their opinion and their grave concerns about what could happen to their jobs or the impact of the regulations if they go forward as currently written on their local communities. The industry has always supported and participated in rulemakings before the Oil and Gas Commission that are based on sound science, good technical data, geological experience. The draft is currently written. We're going before a commission that has very little experience with the oil and gas industry. The process itself has been very truncated. The commissioners are in the process of trying to review close to 10,000 pages of written submissions and then review and deliberate as part of the rulemaking in 12 days. So it's going very quickly. The last time there was a wholesale rewrite of the regulations was 1994, and it took the commission almost 5 years because the issues are so complex and so technical. The state appears to be rushing forward in this process. We as an industry think that it's just too important to rush decisions on this.
One of the topics in particular that seems to have driven a lot of email our way and a lot of feedback from our viewers is a particular rule that was introduced that will require that gas drilling and exploration be shut down for 90 days to deal with wildlife migrations.
Right.
And Dendi Heisel writes in, or Heisel, I apologize if I pronounced his name wrong, gas companies can't conduct business under such restrictions, he writes. Please do not unduly burden this industry with extreme environmental regulation. Do you think that's what's going on?
I think so. I think that you have to find a balance. I think that the industry has proven over the last 40 plus years that environmental values, reverence for wildlife and reverence for environmental situations does not preclude oil and gas exploration and development. I mean, currently on the western slope, several companies are participating in wildlife studies just to see what the impact is, to impose a 90-day moratorium, and it is a 90-day moratorium in the rules to protect certain species. What other business around the state can operate 9 months out of the year?
Let me play devil's advocate with you. Governor Ritter was on Meet the Press earlier this morning on Channel 9, on 9 News, and talked about the oil and gas industry needing to come to terms that there needs to be environmental regulations, there needs to be wildlife protection at the same time as having a successful industry. And that statement may be backed up by Jeannie Dorn, who writes in from Longmont, saying, why can't the government have more regulation over the oil and gas companies?
Well, frankly, I think that the oil and gas industry in this country is one of the most heavily regulated industries. In the state, we are subject to, and have been for decades, regulations promulgated by the Oil and Gas Commission, air and water quality regulations. Currently, we're operating with best management practices to take it for wildlife, to make sure that wildlife activities, migration corridors, habitat, are not unduly impacted by our activities. I think that coming forward with a very prescriptive command and control regime, which these wildlife restrictions represent, is not going to allow some of the best thinking and creativity as to how to address these wildlife issues. Industry's concern with the regulations as they're currently drafted is that we must consult with the Wildlife Division. Well, the Wildlife Division is, and through the Wildlife Commission, is on record as saying they don't think 90 days is sufficient to protect wildlife values and balance energy exploration and development. So we find ourselves in a bit of a box on that, Adam.
You know, and I'll put this, I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
I'd like to tack on, I'm glad you raised Governor Ritter, because we're getting very mixed signals from the governor in the sense that there is no question that these new regulations will decrease drilling, which means a decrease in production available for consumers in a time period when we're all paying record prices for energy. That's a disconnect, but we're also seeing a growth in demand in Colorado for the backup for renewable energy for natural gas. The wind generation in Colorado has to be backed up by natural gas because it's an intermittent resource. And right now we're spending in this state $330 million on gas pipelines and a storage field to back up wind generation. So we have a governor that's in effect decreasing supply, increasing demand, and there's some talk about a severance tax change that'll increase taxes.